Tom Seaver is one of these guys. If you spend any kind of time around him, I mean, he could have been chairman of the board at IBM if he wanted to go that way. I ran across two ball players that I thought had that kind of mental strongness and ability to be able to do something like that other than in baseball.
I didn't see Tom Seaver until he came up in 1967. And just what Jack is saying, there was no break-in period for Tom. There wasn't any sort of wobbling while he got his feet on the ground as a brand new big leaguer. There was Tom Seaver out of the box as the guy who was going to be in the Hall of Fame one day if he stayed strong and he didn't incur any injuries.
What most people don't know about, he was a student of the game. He wanted to know what every area of the game, why did that guy do this on offense, or why did that guy did that? It wasn't just about pitching with him. He was a competitor. He worked on his hitting. Most pitchers don't even think about that. He wanted to be a better hitter. He wanted to be a better bunter. He just wanted to improve himself in every area of the game.
You know, when I first started the alumni director job a couple of years ago, I became really close to all these guys on the days, just introducing great Cleon Jones, who caught the last out in the 1969 World Series. Art Shamsky hit about 600 in the playoffs against the Braves, and we helped us get to the World Series win. Rod Bodum, one of the great catches all time in the World Series. It kept us going. Craig Anderson, an original Met, who in 1962 won 3 games, saved 4, and we won 40 games that year. So it's a pretty good percentage. And last but not least is Jack Fisher. Well, split the order up. Raise your hand. I'm sorry. Yeah. And Jack Fisher, who had the honor of starting the first game at Chase Stadium against the Pirates in 1964. You know, we're here to really honor 3 Met legends from the 60s, Casey Stengel, Gil Hodges, and Tom Seaver. You know, Casey Stengel took a lot of abuse. You know, he portrayed as a buffoon, a jokester. You know, when he was with the Yankees, he won part of 9 world championships. But with the Mets, he had in 62, 120 losses, 111 losses, 109 losses, 112 losses. But Casey had a function, but I think these guys would speak to. He was the buffer to keep the press and the media from talking to the players, and he was trying to keep everything going straight. And Gil Hodges, who joined, and Tom Seaver joined us in 67, gave us credibility, and Gil Hodges took over the manager's job in 68, and then next year we won the World Championship. I'd like to start off with you guys. You know, give me some recollections, start with you, Cleon, of Casey Stengel, and what kind of guy really was he?
I would think the old timers on the other end. But let me just say, Casey, my first major league manager was Casey Stengel. And he was a very knowledgeable individual. But when I played for him, he was 75 years of age. So I'm 82, and a lot of things I can't remember. I'm sure at 75, Casey couldn't remember either. But so far as the game, he could remember every player that he ever played against and what his strength was and who did well against other players. The writers loved Casey because he was a showman. He could always monopolize the conversation and give the writers what they wanted as relate to baseball and alcohol. So I'm not saying Casey drank all the alcohol. I'm not saying the writers drank all the alcohol. But that's how we meet as individuals. We put our talents on our shoulders and a drink in our hands, and we share those things. And that's how we did it in baseball at that time. But the most knowledgeable manager that I played for was Gil Hodges. So far as legends, all of us know that Casey was a legend. But when you got Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays and Elston Howard and Whitey Ford and all those people playing for you, you can win ball games. But when you come to a new organization where everybody's trying to find themselves and trying to find themselves in the big league, it became a much harder job for Casey. Not just putting 9 players on the team, but filling a roster.
Sorry.
No, you're not sorry, but go ahead.
Craig, what do you remember from the early years in '62?
I was with the St. Louis Cardinals in 1961, and I had a pretty good year with them for half a season. But my name was on the list for the draft, and surprisingly enough, the Mets grabbed me early in the draft. So I said, okay, we're going to a new town, a new team. I think Solly Hemus was the reason I got drafted in the earlier rounds, because he was a manager of the Cardinals who got fired while I was at the Cardinals. And then later on, he got with the Mets, and I sort of feel like he went after the Cardinal players that the Mets took, not just me. But Casey Stengel, when I heard about him, all I knew is this guy was the guy, the manager for a long time, Yankee World Series. And then when he lost his job there, it was natural for the Mets to pick him up. And I think it excited all the players that were drafted. At least if they hadn't played for him, we were wondering what it was going to be like. So it didn't take me long to figure out what it's going to be like. On the first day when we were in the locker room, all the players were sitting around the locker room, and Casey finally walked in the room. We were waiting. When's he get? Walked in the room, sat down, said a few real encouraging things to the players for the year, and he's looking forward to the season and everything. And everything was good. And at the very end of his talk, he says, "Now, I want you all to go out and line up alphabetically according to size." Now that stopped all of us right there. Wait a minute, alphabetically according to size. Well, that sort of was the tone for the way we're going to hear things from Casey. And I have some stories I will tell. I don't know how much you want me to
Tell your Marv Throneberry story if you could.
Which one?
The one with the Empire in.
Throneberry. All right. This is we're in the early part of the season. Well, we're playing the St. Louis Cardinals, and we are losing 4-2 in the bottom of the 8th inning. We have 2 runners on, and Marv Throneberry is pinch hitting. Comes up. I'm sitting in the Polo Grounds. We sat in the right center field wall in the playing field. Well, anyway, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, this line shot. Throneberry did have power when he hit it good. And, boy, he hit one into the right center field. And the crowd is going crazy. And they should, because the 2 runners scored, the score's tied, and Marv is standing on third base. Well, the Cardinal pitcher retrieved the ball back, stepped off the pitching rubber, threw the ball to second base. Runner's out. The crowd goes crazy. Stengel, who I hadn't seen run out of the dugout very often, came out the dugout pretty fast, and he is furious. And he runs out towards the second base umpire to let him know what a bad call that was. And as he's walking out towards the center to the second baseman, the first base umpire comes over and says, "Casey, you might as well forget it. He missed first base too." And that's a long-standing story that stuck with him. And then I told him the next day, in the first inning that we were batting at the Polo Grounds, Charlie Neal hits a solo home run. Okay, we're all happy. We're watching Charlie start to run the bases. Casey jumps out of the dugout, stands on the steps of the dugout, and as Charlie gets to first, he goes, "Touch it." He goes to second, "Touch it." And third base, "Touch it," while everybody else.
Yeah. Right.
That's just the type of stuff we wouldn't expect it, but we saw it, and it was.
Thank you. Mr. Swoboda, what do you have to say?
I just remember my rookie year in the big leagues. I had been signed by the Mets a year before, and I got to go to spring training, my very first exposure to professional baseball. at an early camp the Mets had, and you came in and you met Casey Stengel, I always felt like I was in the presence of a legend from the get-go. I listened to what he had to say. I felt like he spoke, he said a lot of words, he told a lot of stories, but the stories about the game all had a point. And if you listen to the point, it was like a parable on the game of baseball. But I thought Casey was a wise man. When the Yankees fired him for being 70 years old, they made that pretty clear. They didn't think a guy that age could manage in the big leagues. The Mets, of course, scooped him right up. And at his press conference, after the Mets had hired him, Casey had the greatest line. He just said, well, in that gravelly voice, he said, well, Yankees fired me for being 70 years old. He said, but I'm here to tell you, I won't make that mistake again. And and if you listen to him, he had a point to everything he said, and that's what he knew what he was there for, and he was there to keep the writers happy and to feed them lines and to keep them from turning on the franchise. There was no better person than Casey Stengel to have done that job back when the Mets were going to lose 120 ball games, which I think it was a sadness for me that the White Sox eclipsed that record last year, because when the Mets lost 120 games, it spawned more good baseball writing than you can lay your finger on. It created legends, and when the White Sox eclipsed that record and lost 121 games, hardly anybody noticed.
Right, let me tell you a story. Art told me Art was playing for Cincinnati, and you were playing with the Reds. You hit a grand slam home run supposedly at Crosley Field, and what happened after that?
Yeah, I have one story about Casey. I only saw him as a kid growing up managing those great Yankee teams, but I did play against the Mets when I first got to the big leagues, and I was with the Reds before I got traded over to the Mets. And there was an incident in Cincinnati, and there was bases loaded, and somebody on this panel, I won't mention the name, but you might be able to figure out who, hit a home run that was ruled in play. And, of course, we saw Casey at his best run out or walk out and argue the play, but he couldn't win that argument. Ended up only one run scored, and it was an interesting play to watch as an opposing player. But, again, there is a player on this panel who hit the ball and did not get credit for a home run. I guess he got one RBI, and all sorts of things happened. And, of course, we beat the Mets. And back in those days, if you didn't beat them, beat the Mets 2 out of 3, it was a bad series.
Who was that, Ronnie?
Well, actually, the story was in Crosley Field, which was the first stadium in Major League Baseball ever to have lights. It was a very short center field fence. It wasn't very far. It was maybe 380 feet from home plate. And it was about a 10-foot-high concrete block wall with a yellow stripe at the top. And then above that yellow stripe was a wooden background. And when I hit a ball, it looked like it came down, hit the wood, and landed at the feet of the center fielder, who was Vada Pinson. He sort of flipped it underhand in, kind of conceding it as a home run. And the umpire was calling it safe, and I got a single and an RBI, and we lost the ball game by more runs than we lost there. But the joke line was Yogi Berra, who was the first base coach for the Mets back then, ran out there and he argued loud and long and got himself thrown out of the ball game. And after the game, 5 or 6 New York baseball writers came into our clubhouse, and they ran right up to Yogi's locker, and they said, Yogi, what did you say to get the heave-ho? And as only Yogi Berra could say, he said, all I told him was, if you couldn't hear that ball hit the wood, you're blind. And everybody in the clubhouse went, that's right.
Jack Fisher is a part of baseball history. 1964, when the Mets opened Shea Stadium, the World's Fair was happening. Pre-game, the field was crowded, so Jack went to Case. He said, can I warm up in the bullpen so I can get some peace? And Jack was the first starting pitcher to ever warm up not next to the dugout in the bullpen. And next year, Jack, unfortunately, you're 8-24, but with a great 3.94 ERA. That's really unbelievable. You lose 24 games. So Casey kept running you out there, time up to time again.
That, to me, is the best compliment that any manager can give a pitcher, is to keep running you out there every 4 days. But I kept us in most all the ball games, and we just had a little trouble scoring runs at the time. But Casey was great for me simply because he gave me the ball every 4 days, and I knew that he had my back. I was in a little bit of a contract dispute with the Mets at one time, and I remember I was making somewhere in the 20,000s, and I had I don't know whether it was at 8 and 24 year, but I won 10 one year too, and I think that was the year, and it all came down to $1,000 difference. They wanted to sign me for $29,000, and the number 30 sounded so much more than 29. So we're back and forth. Of course, we had nobody to negotiate for us. We had to negotiate our own contracts. So finally I said to Johnny Murphy, I said, I'll tell you what, just go to Casey. Let's let Casey make the decision. If he says that I'm worth $30,000, I'll sign. If he says no, I'll sign your $29,000. They did. I signed my $30,000. Casey had my back.
Jackie, at that time, you guys went to the World's Fair in '64, and I hear your favorite song, It's a Small, Small World, right?
Doing what?
It's a small, small world.
Oh, my. They took us over in jitneys one day, and you take your whole family over, and it was great because the big crowds were there, and the jitney would go up in front, and we were able to get in there all by ourselves. I mean, before the crowd got in. And like I say, for about 3 weeks after that, It's a Small, Small World is the only thing that I was humming, because you heard that all the time over at the World's Fair.
So when Gil Hodges came over to the Mets from Washington in '68, and I think Craig is the only one who was with Gil as a player in '62. He was hurt in '63. What kind of a guy was Gil as the first baseman when he came over? Hit the first home run in Mets history, if I'm correct. And what kind of a player was he in early on?
Hodges.
What kind of a player was he?
Gil Hodges was one of the finest players that I had to play here to play for and with. And he won 2 games. I won 3 games. He won 2 of them for me. So he definitely was. But he was just a kind of player that he cared about everybody on the team, and he played as hard as he could. He was injured at times and didn't play, and I think we missed him when he was hurt. But Judy and I got to know him a little bit during spring training, and they found out that we played bridge. And by gosh, one day he came over and said, "Hey, how would you and Judy like to play a little bridge with Cookie Lavagetto and me?" Well, we were shook. Oh, we were shook. Sorry. But we were excited. So he actually came up to our room at spring training, and they sat down, and we had just a fantastic evening, and we got all the cards, and they just anyway, that's bridge. But just the fact that they came up and spent time with us meant a lot to us, and so yes, that was one thing that I. But Gil Hodges was the home run he hit off, against the Braves, gave me a win, and then I got in the second game, and Hobie Landers did the first game, and Gil won the second.
So in Gil's first year as a manager in '68, we lose less than 100 games for the second time in our career. And let me go start in spring trading in '69. Do you remember what he said in spring trading was, play better defense, win more run games, you have a chance? And I want all the '69 guys to comment on that. Do you remember when he speak in St. Petersburg?
Yeah, opening spring training, our first team meeting, when he addressed the team, and he was trying to tell us how good we could be. And he was also saying that we were a lot better than we thought we were. And we were all looking around at each other. And I think he was in the wrong clubhouse. Because in '68, we were lousy. And we were taking on a lot of new faces with talent. With Seaver, Ryan, Kuzman, Swoboda, Shamsky, all these people was in the locker room. But we were new to one another, and he was trying to introduce us to Gil Hodges baseball. His saying was, if you don't beat yourself, it's difficult for the other team to beat you. And we really didn't know what he meant about that. But he simply meant that if you don't make errors and make bonehead plays and play a sound game, that it takes a lot for a team to beat you, especially with the potential of our pitching staff, with Ryan, Seaver, Kuzman, Dick Selma, Gentry. You can go on and on with the names. There were great arms that was on that team. But we as players hadn't realized that there was something special about this team and about this manager.
All right, you want to just pick it up from there?
Yeah, I remember he just said we lost over 30 games by 1 run. And as Cleon said, we didn't play very well in '68, his first year, but you could sense that he was going to straighten things out because of the way he managed, and he made a lot of sense. Even though we finished 9th, a half game out of last place, that was only one division, National League then in '68. But when he said that you got to find ways to win 10-9, 8-7, 5-4, 3-2. Not every game is going to be 2-1, even though we had good pitching. And he made a lot of sense. And I think guys at that point started to understand that you have to find ways to win. And the thing about Gil is he had been such a winner as a player. And I think we just started to believe in what he was saying. And even though we didn't play great all the way until probably August, you could sense that there was a sign that the team was starting to be able to play better. And what we were good at is finding ways to lose. And he was able to turn that around for us, and we were able to then find ways to win. And the thing about Gil that I think really kind of stands out in my mind, that he had this ability to get everybody involved. And then he got the most out of everybody because you couldn't sit back and say, well, I'm not playing today, and who knows when I'll play again, because he got everybody involved. And
to your point, in Game 5 of the World Series, Al Weiss, who wasn't a regular, he hit a game-winning home run to help us win. And
yeah, he platooned in 4 positions and sometimes 5 all year. And the thing about it is, I tell people this, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Ronnie and I were in right field, and in the long term, it hurt our careers. It didn't help our careers. But the fact is, it was working, and we believed in each other. And when you win, things happen, and you start believing in everybody. And he got the most out of the bench. He didn't rely on sabermetrics or printouts. He had a feel for the game. He knew every player at the end of the bench, and every player at the end of the bench knew at some point they might get in the game, and it was a good probability we were going to do it. And I think that was really the key. And I think when you talk about that team, and you've got 2 guys right here who were so instrumental in us winning that year, but if you talk about that team, it's also about guys like Kenny Boswell and Wayne Garrett and all those, Rod Gaspar and Duffy Dye. I mean, it's just not about the Seavers and the Kuzmans and those guys. It's about everybody who was part of that team. I think that's the true legacy, and I think he got everybody to believe in what he thought was the best way to win. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I don't know about the other guys, but there's no doubt in my mind if Gil would have lived longer, that the Mets would have won more World Series with him as manager.
How about you, Ronnie?
Yeah, I believe what Artie's saying is the truth. He mentioned the magic word sabermetrics, which defines today's game of, uber statistical analysis and whatnot that comes out of computers, and they print it out, and it's, a big roll of numbers and whatnot that managers make their decisions by on how to structure their lineup. Gil's sabermetrics were up here in his brain. When I wrote my little memoir about the '69 season, I went back and looked at every ball game and looked at all of the decisions Gil made and the changes he made and the changes he didn't make. His feel for his players all came out of an understanding of what the game required and what he was looking for at that point in time, and it was uncanny. The way he used people. If you got hot, you would play. You think about that season. Gil played a lot of faces in that lineup early in the season when we were bubbling around 500 and not really looking like we were going anywhere. And it was into June that we had this amazing run. We were out of the picture in the National League East, and we went on about a 10 or 11 game win streak. We swept the West Coast teams in Shea Stadium. We kept the streak going on the road against the Western teams. It turned into about 11 games in a row, and all of a sudden we're in the hunt. And that's when the Mets decided to make the deal for Don Clendenon at the trading deadline. We picked him up from Montreal, where they were. Gene Mauch was trying to trade him down to Houston, and he wasn't going. He didn't want to play down there, and he held firm to that. So he stayed in Montreal. He was in shape. He came to us ready to play as the platoon, right-hand platoon at first base with Ed Kranepool. And what I'm saying is he was a piece we needed, a big right-handed power hitter to help us score a few more runs for a pitching staff that had already shown itself to be pretty good. And I think things kind of came together then. We got in the middle of the race, and and when we got into August going into September, we were 6 games behind the Cubs, and all of a sudden in about 10 days, we caught them and passed them and never looked back. We won 3/4 of the games we played in the last 6 weeks of the season. It wasn't so much the Cubs failing as the Mets hit some kind of supercharge, is what I believe. And it was, just a combination of a bunch of people who were ready to contribute, and Hodges was almost wizardly in the way he used his people.
Thank you, Ray. Jack, you weren't a big Gil Hodges fan. Only kidding. Right? After the 1967 season, you got traded. Big part of the 69 Mets for Al Weiss and Tommy Agee. Did you have gotten a ring or something?
What I understand on the trade, they offered to get Tommy Agee, they offered either Don Cardwell or me, and they chose me. So Don got to stay, and he got the ring. And you keep talking about the '69, the first part of the season. I was with Cincinnati in '69, and the first part of the season, we were that team that was on 9 and 10 game winning streaks. We had probably at one time in middle of June, we probably had about a 5 or 6 game lead because we were in the same division back then. And then all of a sudden, sometime after the All-Star break, and the Mets just got so hot that it was ridiculous, and we didn't stay hot. So they beat us out, and the Cubs beat us out also.
So we get to the World Series against the Orioles. I think you guys remember that we lose the first game with Seaver pitching. Does anybody remember what Gil said in the locker room after that game?
Gil was not a guy that was into big clubhouse speeches. What Gil was thinking was in the way he wrote that lineup, and whether you were playing or not, his statement was in how he handled the team. But he did say one thing that I remember after we lost Game 1 in the World Series against the heavily favored Baltimore Orioles with a bunch of future Hall of Famers in their lineup. He said, "Fellas, just remember, You don't have to be anything but the team that got you here. And I felt like that was an awareness that we could use at that time. In other words, don't try to swell up and be bigger than the team you are. What got you here was good enough. And I think it made sense. You relax, you just play the games out and see what happens instead of trying to be something else. What you are as a team is really the best you're going to ever be anyway. Trying to be better than you are never really works. And Hodges had his finger on it right there.
You saw it.
Well, I have the distinction of making the last out of the only game we lost in the World Series, which was Saturday. But the thing I think we all thought, at least I believe we thought, was that even though we lost the first game, we had Jerry Koosman pitching the next day. And if we come back 1-1, everything changes. We would have lost the second game and come back 0-2. We might have lost 4 in a row. Who knows? But Jerry pitched a great game. Ron Taylor saved the game for us. And I think we all felt, because we had such great pitching, and even though Seaver didn't pitch terrific that day, we had Koosman pitching the next day, and as fate would have it, we won and came back, and Gentry pitched well, and Ryan pitched in that Game 3, and Tom came back in Game 4, and this guy made the great catch in Game 4. Koosman came back in Game 5, and the rest is history. I think that people, which doesn't amaze me anymore, is that we're, 56 years later, they're still talking about the 69 Mets.
Yeah, one question I want to ask you. Game 5, Davy Johnson's up and winning 5-3, fly ball in left field. Did you think it was out?
Well, in talking to everybody on the bench and Koosman, everybody thought it was out but me. When the ball went up, I took 2 steps back and realized the ball was in front of me. And Koosman told me right after the game was over that he thought for sure it was a home run. But point of order here, as a team, that 69 team, I've never seen so much confidence in a team that I witnessed that particular year. After we lost that first game, some of us went out together to eat crabs, I think, Ronnie, steamed crabs, and there were people in the restaurant, 2 or 3 tables over from us, saying, "Oh, the Orioles are going to sweep the Mets. The Mets have no business in the same ballpark with the Orioles," and so we heard a Seaver stood up and said to the guy, "Would you like to make a bet?" He didn't know who we were. The guy that was talking, say, "Would you like to make a bet on that?" The guy said, "Sure, I'll make a bet. What would you like to bet?" He said, "Well, who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm Tom Seaver, and these are my teammates." And the guy paused for a while. He said, "No, I won't bet you, but I won't take back what I said. The Orioles are a much better team." And I think Seaver or somebody said, "Well, we'll find out." But we had confidence in one another, and we were surely confident to think that we would roll it back.
To get to Mr. Seaver now, Jack, you actually pitched with Tom in Jacksonville right before we got to the Mets. You pitched with him in 66, right? Did you think then that Tom Seaver was going to be Tom Seaver?
I had absolutely no doubt. Tom Seaver is one of these guys, if you spend any kind of time around him, I mean, he could have been chairman of the board at IBM if he wanted to go that way. I ran across 2 ball players that I thought had that kind of mental strongness and ability to be able to do something like that other than in baseball, just with their head on their shoulders. That's him and Johnny Bench. They were the 2 smartest and hardworking guys that I was ever around in baseball, and along with Pete Rose.
You didn't feel that way about me?
This is an exception.
Yeah. Roddy, how about you?
Well, I just remember I didn't see Tom Seaver until he came up in 1967. And just what Jack is saying, there was no break-in period for Tom. There wasn't any sort of wobbling while he got his feet on the ground as a brand new big leaguer. There was Tom Seaver out of the box as the guy who was going to be in the Hall of Fame one day if he stayed strong and he didn't incur any injuries. Tom brought all of the stuff, all of the savvy, all of the confidence you could want to be a winning pitcher in Major League Baseball from day one. And all he needed was time to amass the statistics from what we saw. I just never saw any difference in the first game I saw Tom Seaver pitch and in 100 games later that Tom Seaver pitched. He was the same, excellent.
I'd just like to add one thing. What most people don't know about, he was a student of the game. He wanted to know what every area of the game, he wanted to possess that knowledge. When he sat on the bench, and he wasn't loud he went about quiet. Why did that guy do this on offense? Or why did that guy did that? It wasn't just about pitching with him. He was a competitor. He worked on his hitting. Most pitchers don't even think about that. He wanted to be a better hitter. He wanted to be a better bunter. He just wanted to improve himself in every area of the game, and that's what made him a Hall of Fame.
I think too is when he was finished pitching, and he was looking for something to do with his life out in California, he established a vineyard out there on some ground in Calistoga, California. He found the perfect place for Cabernet grapes. He enlisted the smartest people he could find to help him put together what became a very distinguished Cabernet Sauvignon wine, and it was excellent. And they're still doing it. But it started with a guy who never settled for anything but the best.
But
that's what he did.
how about you, Ward?
Yeah, I got a chance to bat against Tom in 1967 before I came over, and I remember one game he was winning 7-0 in the ninth, and I hit a 3-run home run in the ninth inning, a meaningless home run. He won the game 7-3, and I got over next spring when I got traded over. I was going around saying hello to people, introducing myself, and I went up to him and I said, "Tom, hi, it's Art." He said, "I know who you are." He said, "I remember that day in June when you hit that 3-run home run. We can talk about it today, but we're never going to talk about it again." But I think if you got a chance to see him pitch, particularly if you played first base, I played a little bit of first base, you saw the beauty in the way he performed. He was a surgeon. He was just an unbelievable guy out there battling batters and playing and pitching against, I think, the greatest conglomerate of hitters in the history of the game with Mays, Aaron Clemente, and Frank Robinson, all those guys. And so I think history will show that he's one of the best pitchers ever to pitch in the game.
You got some Crick?
Yeah, I was fortunate to go to Jacksonville in 1966, and Tom was there. And so I spent 2/3 of the season in Jacksonville, and he was 12-12. And I looked at him, though, through the good games and the bad games, and I saw a true professional. He was mature enough to handle a 12-12. We didn't win a whole lot. We won more games, but it was about 500 team. But I watched how he worked, how he handled himself mentally. And I said, you asked me today, what did we think of him? Well, what I thought of him was that he is going to be a very good major league pitcher in the future because of the way he handled himself mentally and physically.
Before we, and I wanted just to pay remembrance to, the 69 team lost 5 members of our team last year. Ed Cranepool, Jerry Grody, Bud Harrelson, Jack DeLauro, and Jim McAndrew. Anybody want to say a couple of members, of our, and the 62 Mets lost Felix Mantilla just recently. So it's been, a lot of unfortunate deaths. But anybody want to reminisce a little bit about any of our fallen teammates?
Well, no, we know. I just turned 80 back in June, and we know you don't have to pay very close attention to note you get around 80 years old. That's a very hazardous time for former players in Major League Baseball for some reason. Maybe because we had more fun than we should have had. But it's a little rough to see guys. Ed Kranepool and I played together for 6 years. We were friends for 60 years. Very different people, but we always cared about one another and what was going on. I felt like the best thing that ever happened to Jack DeLauro was getting a pitch in that night, for those Mets in 1969. A guy that was just sort of on the edge of major league ability and didn't get to do much more than that. And Jim McAndrew was a guy with a big arm. And you look at what he did when he first came to the big leagues, and the Mets didn't score any runs for him in the first 6 or 8 games he pitched. But his performance was amazing. If you saw Jim, you thought he was going to live to be 100. We're all aware of that sort of level we're getting to age-wise.
Yeah, I think once you anytime you lose friends, no matter what the situation, it's tough. 5 last year. I lost a good friend, Pete Rose, who I started my career with at Cincinnati. A lot of people we know that passed away, but the guys that you went to war with and shared special moments, and then go ahead and win a World Series, and became friends with all those guys, and they all contributed something to the success of the team. It's always going to be you're going to be affected by it. So I hope these 2 guys are around for a lot longer time, and the rest of the guys who are still around from that '69 team, because it was all a very, very special time for all of us.
Well, I just like to add 1 or 2 things. Is that in 1962 I signed in August with the New York Mets. Eddie signed in '62, must have been May, early June. And when I signed in August, I wanted more money than they was willing to give. And their rationale was that Eddie Kranepool got all the money. So I first got the chance to meet Kranepool in winter ball. I think Craig was down there in the Winter League in 1962 with Ron Hart, Paul Bear, and 1 or 2 other guys that you might know. But when I sized Eddie up, and I said he was worth every penny that he got from the Mets, and that I wanted to be as good as Eddie at that time, because he didn't swing at bad balls. He was a good-looking first baseman, and he did great at the plate because he had that plate discipline. That he had great swings and good at bats. And the good news is that we had Salahimas. His name came up earlier with a young group like us, and he realized the potential in Eddie and myself. And every time I saw Eddie in the future, I said, "Give me my money," yeah, because. But I have very fond memory of him.
Just so everybody knows, next year we're going to have a patch on our uniform the whole season in Eddie Kranepool's honor. In closing, I just want to give a brief update what these guys are doing. Cleon Jones is doing great work in Mobile, helping revitalize the city, working with the city of New York, Mobile, doing great work. Art Champsky just came out with his 3rd book on a 69 Met. Tell people what the name is, Art.
Met stories I only tell my friends, so I'm trying to tell some inside stuff on these 2 guys.
Yeah. And
You should sell 1 million copies.
And Cleon had a book about 69 Mets. Ronnie, what's the name of your book, too? I forget.
Well, as you would guess, it's called Here's the Catch.
Well, what's that about, Ron? No, just kidding.
My wife actually thought of the title, but you know, when you're known, you know, somebody said to me, "How long are you going to keep trying to make a living off of one catch?" And I said, "How long have I got?"
Yeah. Hey, Jack, you're involved with Lehigh University. You stay involved with them? Yeah.
No, not Lee.
No, Craig, I keep saying it. God damn, sorry. Forgive me. Craig, you're involved with Lehigh University.
Yeah, after I got out of pro ball, I got the chance to go back to the school that I really enjoyed my career, academic years there, and got the opportunity then to turn around and work with young players. And I look back on that as being around young people my whole life makes you stay younger. You're thinking younger than thinking older. And my wife and I both agree, being around all those years in baseball, I did quite a bit, and I even got a guy to the big leagues in my coaching, so I felt good about Paul Mitchell, yeah.
And Jack, you're still involved. You can follow it a lot closely.
What, I follow? Oh, there's probably very few Met fans more involved in the Mets than I am. If there's a game on television, nothing else matters. We watch the game, and I just love what they're doing. Hopefully we got enough pitching. I think we got a great lineup now. We just gotta hold the other team down.
Well, thanks everybody for joining this panel. I enjoyed it, and thanks everyone.